Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button because today we are diving deep into one of the most transformative books ever written about success, decision-making, and building a life that actually works. The book is called Principles by Ray Dalio. And I am not exaggerating when I say this book has changed how millions of people think about everything from investing to relationships to leadership to their own personal growth. Ray Dalio is the founder of Bridgewater Associates, which is the largest hedge fund in the world. He built it from scratch, started with just $8,000 in his apartment, and grew it into an institution that manages over $150 billion in assets. That alone makes him worth listening to. But what makes Principles truly special is not just his financial success, it is the fact that he wrote down everything he learned along the way. He did not keep his strategy secret, he did not hoard his knowledge. He published an entire playbook, open and honest, so that anyone willing to read it and apply it could benefit from decades of hard-won wisdom. That level of transparency is incredibly rare in the world of finance and business, and that is exactly why this book has resonated so deeply with people across every industry and every background. Let me take you back to where this all began. Ray Dalio was born in 1949 in Queens, New York. His father was a jazz musician and a professional violinist, and his mother was an opera singer. The family was not wealthy by any means. In fact, they struggled financially during much of Ray's childhood, but what they had was curiosity and a willingness to learn from experience. Ray got his first taste of the stock market at the age of 13. He bought shares of Pan American Airways for $24 per share. He was excited. He thought he had struck gold. Then the stock dropped to $11.50. He was devastated. He almost sold at a loss, but he talked himself out of it. Eventually, the stock recovered, and he made about $100 on the deal. That early experience taught him something fundamental. The market does not care about your feelings. It does not reward optimism or punish pessimism. It simply moves according to forces that are largely beyond any single individual's control, and the only way to navigate it successfully is to understand those forces and develop a systematic approach to dealing with them. That lesson, repeated and refined over thousands of decisions across 5 decades, became the foundation of everything he would later call Principles. Now, here is something many people do not know about the writing of this book. Principles was not written in a comfortable office or a quiet study. Much of the initial thinking and drafting happened during a period of profound personal and professional crisis. In the early 2000s, Dalio was facing immense pressure. Bridgewater had just gone through the dot-com bubble burst, and the fund had lost money in 2000 and 2001. Investors were nervous, employees were confused, the market was unpredictable. Dalio realized that he could not keep making decisions on the fly, relying on intuition and instinct. He needed a framework. He needed to externalize his thinking. So he started writing down his principles. At first, they were just personal notes, then they became a shared document within Bridgewater, then they became part of the company culture, and eventually, they became the basis for this book. The book itself was published in 2011, but the principles inside it represent over 40 years of trial, error, and reflection. Dalio did not write this book to sound impressive. He wrote it because he genuinely wanted to help people make better decisions. He has said in interviews that if his principles can help even one person avoid a costly mistake or make a better choice, then the book has served its purpose. That humility, that desire to give back rather than to show off, is what separates Principles from the typical self-help bestseller. This is not a book about positive thinking or wishful manifestation. This is a book about building a machine for thinking, a systematic approach to life that you can refine and improve over time. Before we get into the specific chapters and content, I want to talk about why this book has received such overwhelmingly positive reviews. On Amazon, it has thousands of 5-star reviews from readers who describe it as life-changing. On Goodreads, it holds a rating well above 4 stars. But what makes the praise so consistent is not just the ideas themselves, it is the way Dalio presents them. He writes in a remarkably clear and direct style. There is no fluff, no vague inspiration, no empty promises. He gives you tools. He gives you frameworks. He gives you exercises, and he challenges you to actually use them. Readers consistently mention that the book made them rethink how they approach problems. Some say it improved their marriages, others say it transformed their careers. Many say it helped them become more rational and less emotional in their decision-making. One reviewer wrote that after reading Principles, he started keeping a decision journal, tracking his choices and their outcomes, and within 6 months he noticed a dramatic improvement in his judgment. Another reader, a manager at a Fortune 500 company, implemented Dalio's idea of radical transparency in her team, and it completely changed the culture of her department. These are not abstract compliments, these are real people, in real situations, applying real tools and seeing real results. That is the power of this book. It is not designed to be passively consumed, it is designed to be actively used. Let me now walk you through the structure of the book and the key ideas in each section. Principles is divided into 3 main parts. The first part is about Dalio's life and the evolution of his thinking. The second part lays out his life principles, the personal philosophy he has developed over the years. The third part lays out his management principles, the systems and practices he has built at Bridgewater. I want to go deep on all 3, because each one contains insights that can genuinely change how you operate in the world. Let us start with the first section, which is essentially Dalio's autobiography. He does not shy away from the painful moments. He describes the conflicts with his father, who was a demanding and often critical man. He describes the early struggles of building Bridgewater, including the near bankruptcy in the 1980s when he was forced to ask his clients to leave money in the fund because he could not pay his own bills. He describes the painful breakup of his first marriage. He describes the internal conflicts at Bridgewater, including a public feud with his longtime business partner. What makes this section so powerful is that Dalio does not present himself as a hero. He presents himself as a student, someone who has made countless mistakes and learned from them. He wants you to see that his success is not the result of genius or luck. It is the result of a deliberate, systematic approach to learning and improving. He shows you the failures first, then the lessons, then the principles that emerged. This is important because it makes the book feel authentic. You are not reading the manifesto of a successful person who wants you to believe that everything was easy. You are reading the field notes of someone who has been through the fire and come out the other side with a toolkit that actually works. One of the most compelling stories in this section is about the 1982 debt crisis in Latin America. Dalio had predicted the crisis based on his analysis of macroeconomic trends, but when the crisis hit, the markets did not move in the direction he expected. He lost a significant amount of money. Instead of blaming the markets or making excuses, he sat down and analyzed what went wrong. He realized that his models had missed a key variable, the role of central bank intervention. He incorporated that variable into his framework, and the next time a similar crisis emerged, he was able to predict it with remarkable accuracy. This is the essence of Dalio's approach: fail, learn, adjust, repeat. He calls this the pain plus reflection equal progress formula. It is a simple equation, but it is incredibly powerful. Most people avoid pain, they distract themselves, they blame others, they rationalize their failures. Dalio argues that pain is actually a signal, a warning light that tells you something is wrong and that you need to pay attention. When you feel pain, instead of running from it, you should reflect on it, understand it, and use it to improve your decision-making. This is a radical shift in perspective. It turns failure from something to be feared into something to be embraced. Now let me move to the second part of the book, which contains Dalio's life principles. These are the personal guidelines he has developed for navigating life and making decisions. The first and perhaps most important principle is the 5-step process for achieving whatever you want. Let me break this down because it is deceptively simple but profoundly effective. Step 1 is to have clear goals. Not vague desires like I want to be successful or I want to be happy. I want to be successful. Specific, measurable, well-defined goals. What do you actually want? Write it down. Step 2 is to identify and do not tolerate problems. Most people ignore problems or blame external factors. Dalio says you need to look at problems head-on and see them as obstacles on the path to your goals. Step 3 is to diagnose the root causes of those problems. This is where most people fail. They treat symptoms instead of causes. Dalio insists on going deep, asking why repeatedly until you find the underlying issue. Step 4 is to design a plan to get past the problems. This is where you create the steps, the strategy, the roadmap. Step 5 is to execute the plan with determination, not perfection. Determination. You will make mistakes, you will encounter obstacles. The key is to keep moving forward and adjust as you go. Dalio illustrates this 5-step process with a powerful analogy. He compares achieving your goals to playing a game, like golf or basketball. In golf, you have a clear goal, you take a shot, you see where the ball lands, you analyze the result, you adjust your next shot, and you keep playing. Most people treat their lives differently. They take shots without a clear goal, they do not analyze their results, they do not adjust, and then they wonder why they are not improving. The 5-step process is simply the disciplined application of the same learning loop that athletes and musicians use every day. The difference is that most people have never applied it deliberately to their own lives. Another critical life principle is the idea of radical truth and radical transparency. Dalio believes that the biggest obstacle to progress is ego and blind spots. Ego gets in the way because it makes us defensive. We do not want to admit we are wrong. We do not want to hear criticism. Blind spots get in the way because we cannot see what we do not know. The combination of ego and blind spots creates a wall between us and reality. Radical truth means being honest with yourself about where you stand, what you know, and what you do not know. Radical transparency means creating an environment where the truth can surface, where people can say what they really think without fear of retribution. At Bridgewater, this means that meetings are recorded, that feedback is constant and direct, and that hiding problems is considered a fireable offense. It sounds harsh, but Dalio argues that it is the only way to ensure that the best ideas win and that mistakes are caught early. He compares it to a newsroom, where the goal is to get the story right, not to protect anyone's feelings. In a newsroom, if you publish incorrect information, you get corrected. The system is designed to surface errors, not suppress them. Dalio wants his organization to work the same way. Let me give you a concrete example of how radical transparency works in practice. At Bridgewater, when an employee gives a presentation, everyone in the room is encouraged to interrupt and ask questions or challenge the presenter's assumptions. There is no such thing as a stupid question. The goal is to stress test ideas in real time, so that by the time a decision is made, it has been thoroughly examined from every angle. This can feel uncomfortable at first. People are not used to being challenged so directly, but over time, it builds a culture of trust and intellectual honesty. People learn that being wrong is not a failure, it is an opportunity to learn, and the organization benefits because bad ideas are filtered out before they can cause damage. Dalio also introduces the concept of believability-weighted decision-making. This is one of the most innovative ideas in the book. In most organizations, decisions are made by the highest-paid person in the room, or by consensus, or by voting. Dalio argues that all of these methods are flawed. The highest-paid person is not necessarily the most credible on every topic. Consensus often leads to mediocre compromises. Voting can be manipulated by charisma or politics. Instead, Dalio proposes that decisions should be made by people who have a track record of success in that specific area. If you are deciding on an investment strategy, the people who have consistently made good investment decisions should have more weight in the decision. If you are deciding on a hiring decision, the people who have consistently hired well should have more weight. This is not about hierarchy. IT is about credibility. And it requires a system for tracking and measuring believability, which Bridgewater has built into its internal technology platform. Now let me move to the third part of the book, which covers Dalio's management principles. This is where the rubber meets the road, where the abstract ideas become concrete practices. The first management principle is about creating a culture of idea meritocracy. An idea meritocracy is a system where the best ideas win, regardless of who proposes them. This sounds simple, but it is incredibly difficult to achieve in practice. Most organizations are hierarchical, which means that ideas from senior people are automatically given more weight. Most organizations are political, which means that ideas from well-connected people are given more weight. An idea meritocracy requires a fundamental shift in mindset. IT requires you to believe that the best idea is more important than the person who has the idea. IT requires you to create systems that surface the best ideas, not the loudest voices. Dalio describes a tool called the dot collector, which is a piece of technology that allows participants in a meeting to anonymously rate each other's contributions in real time. If someone makes a good point, you can press a button to give them a dot. If someone is being arrogant or dismissive, you can press a different button. The data is collected and analyzed, and it provides an objective measure of who is contributing the most value to the discussion. This is not about popularity. IT is about impact, and over time, it helps identify the most credible thinkers in the organization, which feeds back into the believability-weighted decision-making system. Another key management principle is the emphasis on extreme ownership. Dalio believes that leaders should take full responsibility for outcomes, both good and bad. When things go well, the leader should give credit to the team. When things go badly, the leader should take the blame. This is not about self-deprecation. IT is about creating a culture where accountability is the norm and blame shifting is unthinkable. Dalio shares a story about a senior executive at Bridgewater who made a costly mistake. Instead of defending himself or blaming others, he stood up in a meeting and gave a detailed analysis of what went wrong, what he could have done differently, and what he had learned. The room was silent. Then Dalio said, "That is the kind of ownership we need more of." The executive was not punished. He was promoted. This sends a powerful message to the entire organization. Mistakes are not fatal. Hiding them is. Dalio also discusses the importance of building a culture of thoughtful disagreement. He believes that the best decisions come from a process of rigorous debate, where people are encouraged to challenge each other's assumptions and test each other's reasoning. But this requires a culture where disagreement is not seen as conflict. IT is seen as a tool for finding the truth. Dalio distinguishes between meaningful work conflict and destructive drama. Meaningful conflict is about ideas. IT is respectful. It is evidence-based. It is aimed at finding the best outcome. Destructive drama is about personalities. IT is emotional. It is personal. It is aimed at winning or defending ego. The goal of a healthy organization is to maximize meaningful conflict and minimize destructive drama. This requires clear norms, strong leadership, and a shared commitment to the truth. Let me now talk about one of the most practical sections of the book, which is the section on decision-making tools. Dalio provides a template for making decisions that anyone can use. The template starts with defining your goal. What do you want? Then it asks you to list the obstacles in your way. What is getting in the way? Then it asks you to diagnose the root causes of those obstacles. Why are they there? Then it asks you to design a plan. What are the steps you need to take? Then it asks you to execute. What are you going to do right now? The template is simple, but it forces you to think clearly and systematically. Most people skip steps. They jump from goal to action without properly diagnosing the problem or designing the plan. Dalio argues that this is why so many people fail. They are busy, but they are not effective. They are acting, but they are not thinking. Dalio also introduces the concept of a decision log, which is a written record of your decisions, the reasoning behind them, and the outcomes. He recommends that you keep a decision log for every significant choice you make. Over time, you can review your log and see patterns in your decision-making. Are you making the same mistakes repeatedly? Are you overconfident in some areas and underconfident in others? Are you letting emotion override logic? The decision log is a mirror. IT shows you who you really are, not who you think you are, and that self-awareness is the foundation of all growth. Now let me address one of the most powerful ideas in the book, the idea of the economic machine. Dalio spends a significant portion of the book explaining how the economy works, not as a complex abstract concept, but as a mechanical system that operates according to predictable patterns. He describes the economy as a series of transactions, like a machine with gears and levers. Each transaction is a sale and a purchase. The speed of transactions is the velocity of money. The drivers of transactions Are productivity growth, short-term debt cycles, and long-term debt cycles. Understanding these drivers, Dalio argues, is essential for making good decisions about investing, business, and even personal finance. Most people think of the economy as something mysterious and uncontrollable. Dalio shows that it is actually a machine, and like any machine, it can be understood, analyzed, and navigated. Let me give you a concrete example of how Dalio's framework for understanding debt cycles has played out in recent history. He describes a short-term debt cycle that typically lasts 5 to 8 years, with a boom phase and a bust phase. During the boom, people borrow more, spend more, and asset prices rise. During the bust, people repay debt, cut spending, and asset prices fall. The central bank responds to the bust by lowering interest rates and injecting liquidity. But if the debt levels are too high, the central bank hits the zero lower bound, and it needs to resort to unconventional measures like quantitative easing. Dalio then describes the long-term debt cycle, which lasts about 50 to 75 years, and encompasses multiple short-term cycles. At the end of the long-term cycle, debt levels become unsustainable, currencies lose confidence, and the system undergoes a major restructuring, often accompanied by depression, revolution, or war. Dalio published this framework in 2016, and many people were surprised by how accurately it seemed to predict the political and economic shifts that followed, including the rise of populism, the Brexit vote, and the trade tensions between the United States and China. Whether you agree with his analysis or not, the framework provides a lens for understanding events that most people find confusing and unpredictable. I also want to highlight Dalio's discussion of evolution as the fundamental force in the universe. He argues that evolution is the process by which things change and improve over time through a cycle of creation, competition, and selection. Everything in the universe, from atoms to organisms to economies to ideas, is subject to evolutionary forces. The implication is that struggle and competition are not bad things. They are necessary for progress. Without pain, without failure, without conflict, there is no learning and no improvement. Dalio says that the single most important advice he can give is to embrace reality and deal with it. Do not wish the world were different. Do not complain about circumstances. Understand how the world actually works, and then work with it, not against it. This is a Stoic philosophy, but it is grounded in practical action, not passive acceptance. Let me now talk about some of the specific life principles that have resonated most with readers. Point 1 of the most popular is the principle of being pain-resistant. Dalio argues that most people are hardwired to avoid pain. When something hurts, we want to run away from it. But pain is information. It is a signal that something needs to change. If you can learn to tolerate pain, to sit with it, to analyze it, you gain a superpower. You become able to make decisions that others cannot make because you are not paralyzed by fear or discomfort. Dalio compares this to going to the gym. Lifting heavy weights causes pain, but that pain is what builds strength. If you avoid the pain, you avoid the growth. The same is true in life. The things that challenge you, that make you uncomfortable, that force you to confront your weaknesses, are the things that will make you stronger. Another principle that readers love is the idea of being radically open-minded. Dalio distinguishes between two types of people. Type 1 people are confident in their own views and dismissive of other perspectives. Type 2 people are aware of their own blind spots and actively seek out differing viewpoints. Type 1 people tend to be rigid and closed-minded. Type 2 people tend to be flexible and open-minded. Dalio argues that Type 2 thinking is far more effective, especially in a complex and rapidly changing world. The key practice for developing radical open-mindedness is to practice empathy and skepticism simultaneously. Empathy means putting yourself in someone else's shoes and trying to understand their perspective. Skepticism means questioning your own assumptions and being willing to change your mind when presented with new evidence. When you combine empathy and skepticism, you get a powerful tool for seeing the world more clearly and making better decisions. I want to also address the section on tools and templates, which is perhaps the most actionable part of the book. Dalio provides a decision-making tree, a checklist for evaluating options, and a framework for conducting postmortems after important decisions. He also provides a template for giving feedback, which he calls the 2-minute drill. The 2-minute drill is a structured way of giving constructive feedback that is direct, specific, and actionable. It starts with stating the behavior you observed, then explaining the impact it had, then suggesting what the person should do differently. The goal is not to criticize. The goal is to help the person improve. Dalio argues that most people are terrible at giving feedback because they are afraid of offending others or starting conflict. But by using a structured approach, you can give feedback that is both honest and respectful. Let me now talk about some of the criticisms of the book, because no book is perfect and a balanced review should address the downsides as well. Some critics have said that Principles is too long and repetitive. They argue that Dalio could have condensed the book significantly without losing the core ideas. Others have said that the management principles are difficult to implement in organizations that are not structured like Bridgewater. A traditional company with a traditional hierarchy may not be able to adopt radical transparency or believability-weighted decision-making without significant cultural change. Some readers have also found Dalio's tone to be somewhat cold and clinical. He treats people almost like variables in a system, which can feel dehumanizing to some. And finally, some have criticized the book for being too focused on Dalio's own experience and not enough on other perspectives. These are valid criticisms, but they do not diminish the value of the book. The length allows for depth, the specificity allows for application, the directness allows for clarity, and the focus on one person's experience is what makes it authentic and compelling. Now let me share some of the most impactful passages from the book, because I think reading them aloud will give you a real sense of Dalio's voice and philosophy. One of my favorite passages is when Dalio writes, "Pain plus reflection equals progress." He says that most people fail to realize that pain is a signal, a teacher, that tells you something is not working and that you need to change. He argues that the most successful people are not the ones who avoid pain, but the ones who embrace it, who use it as fuel for growth. Another powerful passage is when he writes, "The biggest mistake most people make is that they confuse their desired outcome with their actual outcome. They think that because they want something badly, they are making progress toward it, but wanting and doing are two different things. Wanting is easy, doing is hard. The only thing that matters is what you actually do, not what you wish you had done." Let me also share a passage about the importance of having a clear vision. Dalio writes, "The most important thing is to have a clear vision of where you are going and why. Without a clear vision, you are like a ship without a rudder, drifting wherever the current takes you. With a clear vision, you can make decisions that are aligned with your goals, even when those decisions are difficult or unpopular." He emphasizes that a vision is not a wish. A wish is something you hope will happen. A vision is something you are committed to making happen. The difference is that a vision requires action, and action requires a plan. I want to now talk about the practical steps you can take after reading this book, because knowledge without action is just entertainment. The first step is to write down your own principles. Dalio encourages every reader to create a personal handbook of principles, a living document that you update as you learn and grow. Start by identifying the decisions you have made in the past and the outcomes they produced. Look for patterns. What worked? What did not? What assumptions did you make that turned out to be wrong? Then write down the principles that emerged from that analysis. Make them specific, actionable, and testable. Do not write vague statements like "be more positive" or "work harder." Write concrete principles like, "When I feel angry, I will wait 24 hours before responding. When I am making a decision, I will write down the 3 best arguments against my preferred option." These specific principles are easier to follow and easier to evaluate. The second step is to build a decision journal. As I mentioned earlier, a decision journal is a record of your important decisions, the reasoning behind them, and the outcomes. You can keep it in a notebook, in a digital document, or in an app. The key is to review it regularly, ideally every week or month. Look for patterns in your decision making. Are you making the same mistakes over and over? Are you being too optimistic or too pessimistic? Are you letting emotion override logic? The decision journal is a tool for self-awareness, and self-awareness is the foundation of all improvement. The third step is to practice radical open-mindedness in your daily interactions. This means actively seeking out people who disagree with you and engaging with their arguments in good faith. It means asking yourself, what would it take to change my mind on this issue? It means being willing to admit when you are wrong and to update your beliefs when presented with new evidence. This is not easy. It requires humility and intellectual honesty, but it is the single most effective way to improve your judgment over time. The fourth step is to apply the 5-step process to a goal you have been struggling with. Pick one specific goal, write it down clearly, identify the obstacles, diagnose the root causes, design a plan, and execute. Do not skip any step. Most people skip step 2 and step 3. They identify the problem superficially and then jump to solutions without understanding the root causes. Dalio argues that if you do not diagnose the problem correctly, your solutions will not work. So take the time to really understand what is getting in your way. Now let me talk about some of the most common questions people have after reading Principles. One question is, do I need to implement all of these principles at once? The answer is no. Dalio himself did not implement all of his principles at once. He developed them over decades, testing and refining them as he went. Start with 1 or 2 principles that resonate with you and build from there. Another common question is, what if my organization is not ready for radical transparency? That is a valid concern. Radical transparency requires a certain level of trust and maturity within an organization. If you are in a toxic environment, implementing radical transparency could make things worse. In that case, start with radical truth on a personal level. Be honest with yourself about your strengths and weaknesses. Seek feedback from a small group of trusted colleagues. Build the habit of open communication gradually. Another question is, how do I deal with people who are not open to feedback? This is one of the hardest challenges. Some people are so defensive that they cannot receive constructive criticism without becoming hostile or shutting down. In those cases, Dalio recommends focusing on the process, not the person. Frame feedback as a shared exploration of how to improve, not as a judgment of the individual. Use the 2-minute drill to keep the conversation structured and productive. Let me now share a story that illustrates the power of Dalio's principles in action. A reader of the channel wrote to me after applying the 5-step process to a problem he had been struggling with for years. He had been trying to transition from his corporate job to starting his own business, but he kept getting stuck. He would get excited about an idea, then hit an obstacle, then lose momentum, then start over. He had been doing this cycle for 3 years without making any real progress. After reading Principles, he decided to apply the 5-step process systematically. He wrote down his goal, which was to launch a consulting business within 12 months. He identified the obstacles, which were fear of failure, lack of a clear plan, and procrastination. He diagnosed the root causes, which were that he had never defined what success looked like for him and that he was avoiding the discomfort of uncertainty. He designed a plan, which included specific weekly milestones, accountability check-ins with a mentor, and a commitment to take one action every day, no matter how small. He executed the plan. 6 months later, he had launched his business and landed his first 3 clients. He credited the 5-step process with giving him the clarity and discipline he had been missing. This is not a unique story. This is what happens when people apply Dalio's principles consistently. I also want to highlight the section on the big debt crisis, which is one of the most important chapters in the book. Dalio uses the 2008 financial crisis as a case study to illustrate his framework for understanding debt cycles. He breaks down the crisis into its component parts, showing how debt accumulation, asset bubbles, and policy responses interacted to create the perfect storm. He then compares it to other historical debt crises, like the 1930s Great Depression and the 1920s speculative boom. To show the recurring patterns, this chapter is dense, but it is incredibly rewarding. It gives you a framework for understanding not just the past, but also the present and the future. You will start to see echoes of historical patterns in current events, and that perspective is invaluable. Let me now talk about the relationship between principles and Dalio's investing philosophy. Many people read this book because they are interested in Dalio's investment strategies, and the book does provide a window into how he thinks about markets, but it is important to understand that Principles is not an investing book. It is a decision-making book. The investing insights are a byproduct of the broader philosophy. Dalio's investment approach is based on diversification, risk parity, and macroeconomic analysis. He believes in spreading risk across uncorrelated assets and adjusting exposure based on the economic environment. He also believes in being contrarian, in going against the crowd when the crowd is wrong. These ideas are grounded in the same principles that underpin the rest of the book: the emphasis on systematic thinking, the rejection of emotion, the commitment to learning from mistakes. If you are interested in Dalio's investing philosophy, I would recommend also reading his essay on the big debt crisis, which is available for free on the Bridgewater website. Now let me address the question of whether Principles is suitable for beginners. Some people worry that the book is too advanced or too dense for someone who is new to these ideas. I would argue the opposite. Principles is actually an excellent starting point because it provides a comprehensive framework that can be applied at any level of experience. The life principles are universal. They apply to students, professionals, entrepreneurs, retirees, anyone. The management principles may require more context to fully appreciate, but the core ideas are accessible to everyone. If you find the book overwhelming, start with the first few chapters and the life principles section. Come back to the management principles later, when you have had time to reflect on the earlier material. The book is designed to be revisited, not consumed in a single sitting. Let me now share some of the most memorable quotes from the book, because I think they capture the essence of Dalio's philosophy in a way that resonates with people. One of my favorites is, happiness is a byproduct of doing good work and being part of something larger than yourself. Dalio argues that fulfillment comes not from chasing pleasure, but from pursuing meaning. When you are working on something that matters, when you are contributing to something bigger than your own interests, you experience a deep sense of satisfaction that no amount of consumption can provide. Another powerful quote is, the machine is always running. The economy, the market, your life, everything is a machine that is constantly operating. You can either understand how it works and navigate it effectively, or you can ignore it and be at the mercy of its forces. This quote encapsulates the entire philosophy of the book. It is about taking control of your life by understanding the systems that shape it. I want to also discuss the concept of the pain button, which is one of the most practical tools in the book. Dalio describes the pain button as a metaphor for the moments in life when you feel significant discomfort, whether it is emotional, physical, or financial. These moments are opportunities for growth. When you feel pain, you have two choices. You can ignore it, suppress it, or run from it. Or you can press the pain button, which means you consciously choose to reflect on the pain, understand its source, and use it as a catalyst for change. Dalio argues that the most successful people are the ones who press the pain button consistently. They do not wait for the pain to go away on its own. They confront it head-on and use it to improve their decision-making. Let me now talk about the section on evaluating people, which is one of the most controversial sections of the book. Dalio argues that the most important decision an organization makes is who to hire and promote. He believes that evaluating people should be based on their believability, their ability to tolerate pain, their openness to feedback, and their track record of good decisions. He provides a framework for assessing these qualities, which includes behavioral interviews, performance reviews, and peer feedback. Some critics have argued that this approach is too mechanical and does not account for the complexity of human nature. Others have argued that it is too focused on past performance and does not adequately consider potential. These are valid concerns, but Dalio's framework is not meant to be applied rigidly. It is meant to be a guide, a starting point for thinking more systematically about people decisions. Now let me discuss the concept of the two sets of eyes, which is a powerful mental model from the book. Dalio argues that every decision should be viewed through two sets of eyes. The first set of eyes is your own, your personal perspective based on your experience and knowledge. The second set of eyes is the perspective of someone who is more credible than you on the topic at hand. By combining these two perspectives, you get a more complete and accurate picture of reality. This is particularly important for decisions that are outside your area of expertise. Instead of relying solely on your own judgment, seek out the input of someone who has more experience or knowledge in that area. This does not mean you should abdicate your own thinking. It means you should supplement it with the wisdom of others. Let me now talk about the section on meditation and self-reflection, which is an important but often overlooked part of the book. Dalio practices meditation daily, and he credits it with helping him maintain clarity and perspective. He describes meditation as a tool for observing your thoughts without being controlled by them. By stepping back and watching your thoughts, you can identify patterns, biases, and emotional triggers that would otherwise go unnoticed. This is directly related to the concept of radical open-mindedness. You cannot be open-minded if you are not aware of your own biases. Meditation helps you become aware of those biases, which makes you more capable of overcoming them. I want to also highlight the section on the importance of having a clear sense of priority. Dalio argues that most people fail not because they lack ability, but because they lack focus. They try to do too many things at once, and they end up doing none of them well. He recommends that you identify your top 3 priorities and focus your energy on those, while letting everything else fall by the wayside. This is not about being rigid or inflexible. It is about being deliberate and intentional with your time and attention. In a world that is increasingly noisy and distracting, the ability to focus on what matters is a competitive advantage. Now let me address the question of whether principles is relevant outside of finance and business. The answer is a resounding yes. The principles in this book apply to every area of life, from personal relationships to health to education to creativity. Dalio himself has said that the principles are not domain-specific, they are universal. The 5-step process works for achieving a fitness goal just as well as it works for growing a business. Radical truth works in a marriage just as well as it works in a boardroom. The pain+reflection equals progress formula works for learning a musical instrument just as well as it works for managing a portfolio. The key is to adapt the principles to your specific context, to translate the general framework into specific actions. Let me now share a story about a reader who applied the principles to a personal challenge. She had been struggling with anxiety and self-doubt for most of her adult life. She had tried therapy, meditation, and various self-help books, but nothing had given her a lasting solution. After reading Principles, she decided to apply the 5-step process to her anxiety. She defined her goal, which was to reduce her anxiety to a manageable level. She identified the obstacles, which were negative self-talk, avoidance behaviors, and a lack of coping strategies. She diagnosed the root causes, which were a tendency to catastrophize and a fear of uncertainty. She designed a plan, which included cognitive behavioral techniques, exposure exercises, and a daily reflection practice. She executed the plan. After 6 months, she reported that her anxiety had decreased significantly and that she felt more in control of her life. She attributed her progress to the systematic approach that Principles had given her. I want to now discuss the concept of the evolution machine, which is one of the most profound ideas in the book. Dalio argues that the universe is an evolutionary machine, and that evolution is driven by the interaction of 2 forces, creation and destruction. New things are constantly being created, and old things are constantly being destroyed. The cycle of creation and destruction is what drives progress. Without destruction, there is no room for creation. Without failure, there is no room for success. Dalio applies this framework to investing, business, and personal growth. In investing, he argues that markets are constantly evolving, and that the only way to succeed is to adapt to those changes. In business, he argues that companies that fail to evolve are replaced by companies that do. In personal growth, he argues that the people who improve the most are the ones who embrace change and use it as an opportunity to grow. Let me now talk about the section on the importance of having a mission and a vision. Dalio argues that having a clear mission and vision is the foundation of all achievement. A mission is your purpose, your reason for being. A vision is your destination, the future you are working toward. Without a mission, you lack direction. Without a vision, you lack motivation. Dalio recommends that you write down your mission and vision and review them regularly. He also recommends that you align your daily actions with your mission and vision, so that every decision you make is consistent with your larger purpose. Now let me address the question of whether Principles is worth the investment of time. The book is over 500 pages long, and it requires concentration and reflection to get the most out of it. I would say that it is absolutely worth the investment, but only if you are willing to engage with it actively. Do not read it passively. Read it with a pen in your hand. Write down the principles that resonate with you. Take notes on the examples that illustrate the ideas. Apply the principles to your own life as you read. The more you engage with the book, the more you will get out of it. If you read it passively, you will finish it and forget most of what you read. If you read it actively, you will finish it and start living by the principles. Let me now share some of the most practical exercises from the book that you can start doing today. The first exercise is the decision log. Start a document where you record your important decisions, the reasoning behind them, and the outcomes. Review it weekly. The second exercise is the pain journal. Whenever you feel pain or discomfort, write down what triggered it, what you did in response, and what you could have done differently. Review it monthly. The third exercise is the feedback request. Ask 3 people in your life for honest feedback on your strengths and weaknesses. Listen without defending yourself. Reflect on what they said. The fourth exercise is the goal-setting session. Write down your top 3 goals for the next year. For each goal, write down the obstacles, the root causes, the plan, and the first action you will take. These exercises are simple, but they are powerful. They force you to slow down, think clearly, and take action. I want to now discuss the relationship between Principles and other popular books on success and decision-making. Books like Atomic Habits by James Clear, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, and The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey are all highly regarded, and they share some common themes with Principles. But Principles is unique in its scope and depth. It covers not just habits and cognitive biases, but also macroeconomics, investing, management, and evolution. It provides a comprehensive framework that integrates insights from multiple disciplines. If you have read the other books, Principles will complement them by providing a broader context. If you have not read the other books, Principles will give you a solid foundation that you can build on. Let me now talk about the section on the importance of having a growth mindset. Dalio argues that the most successful people are not the ones who are naturally talented, but the ones who believe that talent can be developed through effort and learning. He cites the research of Carol Dweck, a Stanford psychologist, who found that people with a growth mindset outperform people with a fixed mindset, regardless of their natural abilities. Dalio applies this insight to his own life, arguing that his success is not the result of innate intelligence, but the result of a relentless commitment to learning and improving. He encourages readers to adopt the same mindset, to view every challenge as an opportunity to grow, and to see failure as feedback rather than as a verdict on their worth. Now let me address the question of whether the principles in this book are culturally specific. Some readers have wondered whether Dalio's principles, which are rooted in American business culture, are applicable in other cultural contexts. I would argue that the principles are universal, but their application may need to be adapted to different cultural norms. Radical transparency, for example, may need to be tempered in cultures that value harmony and indirect communication. Believability-weighted decision-making may need to be balanced with respect for hierarchy in cultures that value seniority. The core ideas, however, are applicable everywhere. The importance of clear goals, systematic decision-making, and learning from failure is universal. The key is to adapt the principles to your cultural context, not to reject them because they do not fit perfectly. Let me now share a story about how Dalio's principles have been applied in education. The school principal read Principles and decided to implement some of the management principles in his school. He introduced radical transparency in staff meetings, where teachers were encouraged to give and receive honest feedback. He implemented believability-weighted decision-making, where teachers with a track record of success in certain areas were given more weight in decisions related to those areas. He introduced decision logs for administrators, where every significant decision was recorded and reviewed. Within a year, the school reported significant improvements in teacher morale, student performance, and community engagement. The principal credited the principles with creating a culture of accountability and continuous improvement. I want to also discuss the section on the importance of having a stress test for your ideas. Dalio argues that every important idea should be stress tested before it is acted upon. Stress testing means subjecting the idea to rigorous scrutiny, looking for weaknesses, challenges, and alternative explanations. He recommends that you find people who disagree with you and ask them to challenge your ideas. He also recommends that you imagine that someone smarter and more credible than you disagrees with you, and ask yourself why they might be right. This process of stress testing helps you identify flaws in your reasoning before they lead to costly mistakes. Now let me talk about the concept of the algorithm, which is one of the most important ideas in the book. Dalio argues that every decision is an algorithm, a set of rules that takes inputs and produces outputs. Some algorithms are conscious, meaning you are aware of the rules you are following. Some algorithms are unconscious, meaning you are following rules without realizing it. The goal is to make your algorithms as effective as possible by identifying the ones that work and the ones that do not. He recommends that you write down your decision-making algorithms, test them against reality, and refine them over time. This is essentially the scientific method applied to personal decision-making. Let me now address the question of how to deal with people who do not believe in the principles. Some people will be skeptical of Dalio's approach. They may find it too analytical, too rigid, too unemotional. They may prefer to rely on intuition or tradition. That is fine. The principles are not meant for everyone. They are meant for people who are willing to think systematically and challenge their assumptions. If you are one of those people, the principles can be transformative. If you are not, that is okay too. The important thing is to find the approach that works for you. I want to now discuss the section on the importance of having a personal evolution strategy. Dalio argues that personal growth is not a one-time event, but a continuous process. You are always evolving, either intentionally or accidentally. The question is whether you are evolving in the direction you want. He recommends that you regularly assess your evolution, asking yourself whether you are becoming more capable, more open-minded, more effective. He also recommends that you seek out experiences that challenge you and force you to grow, rather than staying in your comfort zone. Let me now share a final story that I think captures the essence of what Principles is all about. A young entrepreneur read the book before launching his startup. He applied the 5-step process to his business plan, the decision log to his key choices, and the pain journal to his setbacks. When his first product failed, he did not give up. He pressed the pain button, reflected on what went wrong, and used the lessons to improve his next attempt. When he faced criticism from investors, he did not get defensive. He sought out the most credible critics and asked them to stress test his ideas. 3 years later, his startup was profitable and growing. He credited Principles with giving him the tools and the mindset to navigate the challenges of entrepreneurship. This is the story of what happens when you take the principles seriously and apply them consistently. Thank you for watching this deep dive into Principles by Ray Dalio. I hope this video has given you a comprehensive understanding of the book and inspired you to apply its principles in your own life. If you found this video helpful, Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And if you have your own experience with applying principles, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. Remember, the goal is not just to understand these ideas, but to live them. So start small, start today, and keep evolving. See you in the next video.